Hello, everyone. Welcome to our evening Sunday Christian Druid service here at the Order of the Druid Order of Mystical Encounters. I'm going to try and do this live with earbuds in so you might be able to hear me more clearly. If you cannot, please comment, maybe even several times, that it'll pop up on my screen here and I can see that you don't hear me and that I can just take them out and do what we normally do. And I'm going to play the drum here for a minute and give people time to tune in. Once again, I'm going to try doing this with the earbuds in. If you're watching and you cannot hear what I'm saying, please comment below and maybe even do it several times if you realize I am not seeing it. So the screen is facing me, so I see the screen and I should be able to see in the comments that you cannot hear me and that I need to take that off and do the normal way. But I've done this before with these in and the sound was clearer when I did the video next to the river, so hopefully this will work just fine. So for those of the Wild Christ tradition, happy Palm Sunday. For those not and just lovers of nature and seekers with the divine, happy Sun's Day as the sun is going down and we are in the in-between the sunset and the night. We come into that time of reflection, introspection, the calming down before rest. and the balance between day and night. And actually, as the sun is going down to my right, your left of the screen, the moon is already coming up, and so there's like this tilt of balance. And so today we're going to finish on our topic about the upper cauldron and do a recap on all three together. And I'm also going to tell you a story that has been told many times. I believe it was the Grimm brothers who made this story well known, though this story and different versions of this story go way back. And where I found this story, to give credit where credit is due, this story I found on YouTube by Story Crow. That's the name of the channel, Story Crow. And I will leave the link for his channel on the Facebook page, and also for you that are watching on YouTube, that will be on the descriptions below. So here, for you watching on YouTube, we do Druid and Native American services, foundationally of the Wild Christ tradition or Christian, but interwoven with the mystical of the values and traditions of our heritage. So if you are of Celtic descent, then this is one way for you to connect to your roots. And if you are of Native American or Native Indigenous, this is a way for you to connect with your roots. And primarily for those who may be of the Christian faith, but want something a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more mystical, a little bit more connecting with nature and with their ancestry. And if you are not of Celtic or indigenous to North America descent, then you are still welcome here. We welcome all people, all faiths, all colors, race, gender. And so the goal here is to find community, connection, and common ground, and respect and love for one another in our journey in life. And so we hope that this service will be a blessing to you. To all my new subscribers, thank you so much. It keeps going up, and that just blesses my heart, and I'm very thankful for that. So if you have subscribed, thank you very much. And if this is your first time watching, please like, share, subscribe, click that little notification bell, and leave a comment below if you would like to. All right, so let's proceed on into the Druid Grove. This is going to be a little bit more meditative and not as we normally do, not as formal. So let us do our 3 breaths connecting to the 3 realms. Then we will light the 3 candles behind me on the altar, and then we will greet and honor the 4 directions. So our first breath in is at our feet, the land beneath us. The second breath is our head with the sky above us. And the third breath is our arms for the water around us, connecting with those 3 realms. Taking a breath in, breathing out, I feel the land beneath me. Breathing in, breathing out, feel the sky above me. Breathing in. Breathing out. I feel the waters around me. And I am centered in this place. With the land beneath us, sky above us, and the waters around us. And in the center lives a living flame. We are grounded, connected, surrounded, and centered within the sacred grove. This is a blessed time. This is a sacred place. This is a place of peace. And now we will burn some Palo Santo. And the three candles behind me are the colors green, blue, and white. And in a lot of Druid orders, those are the colors for the three grades of Druidry. The blue being the beginning for the Bardic grade, and then green for the Ovate or the Veda, and then the white for the Druid grade itself. Though you are a Druid as soon as you are in the Bardic grade. So Palo Santo to invite good energy, good presence. And now let us honor the four directions. Once again, if anything I say does not align with you, feel free to reword it aloud or in your mind in what way does, or just skip it. Starting in the east, to the east, element of air, and the first rays of morning light. Air and light from the divine around us and within us. Breath of the wild Christ, we honor you in the east. May there be peace in the east. To the south, the element of fire. Divine One, you are the flame within our will and passion. O great mystery, as the flame without, around, and about, may it so be within. We honor the south and the element of fire, of the passion of the vine. May there be peace in the south. To the west, in the element of water, the element of cleansing, purification, refreshing, and of emotions. From the water, our emotions flow, and from the divine, we are connected in that flow. Wild Christ of the West, we honor you in the West. And may there be peace in the West. And to the north, in the element of earth, of the stableness and stillness of the planet beneath us, and to the bare and the starry heavens, earth, our mother and nurturer. Apologies for the background vehicle. Of the divine, we have stability. From the divine, we have a foundation upon which we stand. We honor you, wild Christ, in the north. And may there be peace in the north. And now, children of earth and star, here within the center, may we find peace in the still center of our being. May we cultivate peace within our sacred grove. And may we gently and powerfully radiate peace within the greater circles of all existences. Let me say that again. Within the still center of my being, may I find peace. Within the circle of the grove, may I cultivate peace. And within the greater circles of all existence, may I gently and powerfully radiate peace. Let us do our three Awins in connection with the three realms, the four directions, and the center, bringing the inspiration from within and above to flow without into our world. Greetings to you just now joining. If you can hear me well, please let me know. If you can't hear me, please let me know. I'm trying with these earbuds so maybe the sound be more crisp and direct to my voice. So, my friends, we have talked about the lower cauldron being in the inner part of the belly. We have talked about the middle cauldron connecting with the cauldron of the heart. And tonight, we are going to talk about the cauldron or the upper cauldron of the head. And I wanted to use smaller cauldrons each time. So with the first cauldron being the lower, I had a bigger cauldron. And then the middle cauldron, I had a little smaller green cauldron. And the cauldron on the lower part at birth and throughout life is upright. And within it is the life force energy. You can imagine that this is with chakras and energetic system of the body. This is with the legs and the root and sacral chakras, dealing with that lower part where that heat of the fire and where the bubbling of the cauldron starts to boil in the bottom. And then going up, we came to the heart cauldron or middle cauldron, the cauldron of vocation and of motion. And this cauldron at birth is on its side, and it can tilt completely upside down, or it can go upright, and it is brought upright through great joy and great sorrow. And we talked about how a lot of great songs and poetry and things that inspire us is a mixture of both joy and sorrow. And a lot of times that our songs that we greatly enjoy have ecstasy of excitement, but yet depth in connecting with our pains and our struggles in life. And I am loving the view right now. Side note, the flames are burning bright. And as we are coming closer to Beltane, we are getting closer to a fire festival. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about the upper cauldron. And the upper cauldron at birth is completely upside down. And even if you look at your skull, it is like a bowl upside down. And this cauldron is turned upright through the rising of the life force in the lower cauldron, which then makes you more attuned and feeling in the heart. And when you come to terms with those emotions of joy and sorrow, and in that struggle, you find your purpose in life, your vocation connected with motion and flow, it rises up and it starts to spin the wheels. And then you have that aha moment. or as we might say, enlightenment or an awakening. And that's why I picked this. And as you can see, it spirals inward or outward, however you want to look at it. But that is what happens in the mind. And in many cultures, the mind is not that important to a lot of us here as Westerners. The mind is almost forefront. We are so intellectual that we come to a belief or a decision of something based on logic, whether it has a heart to it or not. And a lot of times we think on things so deeply that we miss what is actually important. And so the upper cauldron is not something to do first. It's what you feel deep within you, what touches and speaks to your soul. And from that, it gives life and purpose and feeling in the heart. And from there, the mind is brought upright. And if you watched our native service last Sunday, how we had talked about the clown dancer and the certain men in the Lakota tribe during calling back the thunders, how they do everything backwards. And we talked about how even while Christ describes in the teachings of how seeing things from the upside down perspective, and when we take our perspective and flip it, we actually see upright. And so this is what this is reminding us again, but we go a little deeper. So in Western world, we want to start at the mind first and try to logically bring everything together. And then if we think that we have it upright, then we start to open our hearts to feel it. And then once we get to feeling it and open ourselves to the vulnerableness of it, then we start to say, okay, you can be a part of my life, and you root it down in your inward being. But if you're starting at the head, and it's the wrong sight, it's the wrong perspective, and you say, okay, this is my thought, this is my belief, this is my worldview, this is what I think is correct, and you then let it go down into you, it's going to change your heart, it's going to change your character, it's going to change your personality in a way that is not right. And so it makes it harder for yourself or someone else to get to the soul of your being and to work back up. And so if we don't focus on the head as much and we start in our deep inner self and then go to the heart, then the brain or the mind, the awakening, the enlightenment, we actually then start to see what we might call the truth or the beauty. And what I said, that a lot of other cultures do not value the brain or the mind, and those are two separate things. Your mind is not your brain, and your brain is not your mind. Your brain functions or gives the orders to the body from what the mind comprehends. And so to the Egyptians, the brain was useless. They didn't even mummify it. They scooped it out and threw it away. Other organs and the heart was jarred in mummification, but the brain was not valued. And to the Celts, the brain was a little bit more valued, but not so much as the heart and the lower body. But now they did believe the soul resided in the brain, because the Celts were headhunters to a degree. And so your enemy, they would whack your head off and take your soul, per se. And a lot of times, in ancient times, they'd have heads on pikes around the village, saying, hey, we captured their soul, don't mess with us, we'll take yours. And then they would keep the skulls of loved ones and talk to that skull, as in talking to their ancestors. And so with them, the mind was a little bit more valued, but it wasn't so much the mind as the function, but as the seat of the soul. And words, to the Druids and stuff, words were of great power. But here's the thing. What the mind embodied and what the mouth spoke is what was within. And so that's why we say with the Alwyn, from the deep I bring it, upon the wind I sing it. It's what's coming up from the inward being, protruding out. And then with the Native Americans, with the Lakota tribe particularly, they have what they call the Great Mystery, or Wonkan Tonkan, which is actually not God. A lot of Christianized natives will call it God, and Americans will say, yeah, that's a name for God, or Great Mystery. Well, actually, it means great energy, and it's a collective. In other words, Tukashila means grandfather. And actually what it means is, you are my relative, and you are dear to me. And so Wonkan Tonkan is the divine counsel that you could say talks with and counsels the Great Spirit. And that it's a tribal effort. Just as we are a tribe of people on earth, the divine is a tribal council. And there's 16 energies in this Wonkan Tonkan. And the very last one is the mind. Some of them is the bear, the buffalo, and stuff. And even with the Asians, to what I know, they do not as well put a big emphasis on the mind. So what am I saying here is, we need to flip it. So instead of bringing everything into the head first, while it is useful, it's deep within us. And you can go back and forth, because if you've watched my videos, you've heard me say we need to reason about something and then let that control our emotions, because if we make a decision based on emotions and not reasoning, we're going to make a mistake. So in other words, what we need to do, now this is not with emotions, this is like this deep inward knowing. And this is kind of where faith starts to take root. It's more of, may not have everything I need, but I know what it does to me. I know the life it brings within me. And then it comes up into the heart. Okay, I feel it. I am digesting it within myself. I see purpose in this. This has got me through my joyful times. This has got me through my sorrow times. And this gives me purpose in life. And through that, you're doing reasoning, but it's the reasoning of the soul and not the reasoning of the head. And as it's coming up, then it aligns and sets that cauldron upright. And then the divine inspiration, the awe wind, can flow into that cauldron and flowing down. And so as one is coming up, one is going down, and you have this figure 8 of flowing up and down and around, and we come into alignment. And even in the wild Christ traditions, there is many teachings about enlightenment and awakening and coming to a realization. There's many stories where it says that the divine weaver opened such and such heart. They opened their heart so they could understand and perceive the message of the good news. And then it says that there is a veil that covers the eyes spiritually, and that when the heart turns to the divine weaver, that veil is lifted and taken away. Sort of like when the heart is open and when the heart turns, then the cauldron of the mind can be upright, and we can see rightly, and things can spiral inward into our growth and into our inner being and knowing. So, let me tell you a shamanic story. This is called The Six Swans and the Maiden. Now, as you listen to this story, I want you to listen with your soul. I want you to listen with your heart. And from there, allow it to direct the thinking, the seeing, and the hearing of the mind. So long ago, in the long ago time, there was a king, and he went on a hunt, as most kings do in these stories. And as he went on this hunt, he got into the thick of the forest, and he got separated from his other noblemen and servants. And as he went through the forest, it began to get dark, sort of like right now. And he started getting tired. He started getting frightened. And it was like, as he walked through the woods, the forest behind him would enclose. And as he went, he knew he was lost. And out of nowhere, this old woman with a bobbing head. There seems to always be this elderly woman with the bobbling head in these old fairy tales. And she came up to the king because she was a witch. She said to the king, "I am king. Come back with me, and I will bring you back to your castle. But I will only show you the way if you will take my daughter to be your wife. And she's very pretty." And so the king, pressed between a rock and a hard spot, agreed. And so he went back to the woman's cabin, and there inside the cabin was her daughter. And she was sitting there as if just waiting for them to arrive, as if she already knew. And this lady was very beautiful indeed. And so the king agreed to marry her. And so the lady said that I will give you many children. And he said, I don't need that. I already have 7. I have 7 children back home. She said, I will make you a good wife and prosper your kingdom. King was sort of like, I don't really care. I just want to get back home. And so the next day, the daughter went with the king, and the mother guided the way through the ever-changing and enchanting forest, and it opened up, and they came upon a road that led back to the kingdom. Well, as the king and his new-to-be bride was approaching the kingdom, people was shouting and yelling, "Hooray, hooray, the king has returned, and he has returned with a bride." See, for the king was married before, and his wife had passed away. And the king did not want to get married again. He had refused to remarry. And so for him to be coming back was a shock, especially with a bride. And so there was this awe and wonder and also excitement. And so they became husband and wife. Well, now the king had this sense and feeling, because he did not think that the old woman, who was a witch, was up to any good. And sometimes, my friend, the most evil is the most prettiest. And so he took his 7 children, 6 boys and 1 daughter, and he took them deep into that forest of enchantment to a tower. And there he set them up in that tower where his to-be bride and this witch of a mother-in-law could not find them. And so, as time went on, the queen had became pregnant with child. And so she did not want anything of his children to be involved with this new child. And so the king, he would venture off at times, and he would take his kingly strolls, and he would tell his wife, oh, I'm just going to go do a king thing and venture off, get some air, pressures of the kingdom, And so he would take with him this ball of string, and he would go into the forest, and he would take this ball of string and cast it on the ground, and it would bob and weave through the forest so he could find his way to the tower. And a lot of these old tales have about the winding string that guides the way. And so he would go and he'd see his children and hug them and love on them and stuff. And so as time progressed, he would come back very happy. And let me just correct a mistake, as I have been listening to this story for a while, but I've not got it fully down. So his new wife does not know about the children. So get that corrected. And so the queen wonders, why is the king so happy when he comes back? And she would hate to see him happy. And he would go and visit them once a week, maybe once every month, once every 2 weeks or so. And so she started asking the servants, why is he going and doing this and that? And all of them was zip tight on information, but she had her ways. And finally, one servant let out the bag, or let the cat out of the bag, and so she started to connive a spell. And as she did, she started weaving shirts, and she would put in these different old magical things that she had learned from her mother. And so she put like runes and sigils and iron and maybe frog's wart, all these different little magical witchery things. And she sewed these 6 or 7 shirts. And so she one day put on the king's robe, one of his robes, to look and appear sort of like him when he would go into the forest. And she found his ball of twine or string that he had locked up in a room. And so she went to the forest edge and tossed the twine of string, and it bebopped through there and led her to the children. So now the 6 boys, they were like a pack of wolves. When Dad would come, they'd run out greeting, "Dad's back, Dad's back." But the daughter, she was more on the shy side. She was at that age where Daddy had to come to her, and she would like to read and study things. And so on this day, unknowingly, because who else would be coming, the 6 boys run out to meet who they thought was their father, but come to find out was their stepmother, the queen. And she tossed out these shirts as the boys ran, and as magically as she would toss one, it would just slip over their head and through around their arms and body. Tum, 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 tum. And suddenly, beaks started to grow, feathers protruded from their arms, and all 6 boys turned into swans. Now, as the daughter was watching this in terror and amazement, she hid back in the tower, and so the stepmother did not find her, and she went back to the castle. And the 6 brothers turned into swans and flew off. And throughout all that night, she wept and cried and wondered. And then the next morning, her father had came to the tower, and she told her father everything that had occurred. And so the father said, "Okay, you've been here long enough, you're coming back with me." And she said, "No, let me stay here, let me process this, let me think." And he said, "Okay, but I'm coming for you tomorrow, and you are coming back with me." So all that day she had pondered and grieved the loss of her brothers. But then she started to wander through the forest, take a little stroll and clear her mind. And as she went, she decided she could not go back to the castle. Something did not feel right. She did not know that it was her stepmother, because she was cloaked. All she seen was a hooded figure who she had assumed was her father at first. And so she went pondering and went walking and knew, I cannot go back there with my father. Something will happen to me. And so she went wandering through the forest until she came to a lake where she could not go any further. And there she saw a shack, and it was open, and she went into that shack and noticed that there was bedding in there. And that night she slept. And in the morning, between day and night, at the dawn, she looked and heard a noise, and through the window flew in 6 swans, and they all landed there. and they started to breathe their breath on each other. And as they did, the feathers would come off of them, and it was her brothers. And so her brothers was excited, and she was excited. And after this little reunion, the brother said in a solemn reality, but sister, it is only between the day and night that we are humans for 15 minutes, and then we go back to being swans, and we are swans for the rest of our lives. And so she said, there's got to be something that can be done. The brother said, there is, but it's a very hard task, and if you fail in it at any point, the spell will be broken, and we will be swans forever. And she thought about it, and she said, I don't care. I can do it. And he said, okay. Well, then you have to sew one shirt a year for 6 years. 6 years, 6 shirts, 6 brothers. And you have to sew them out of aster flowers. It's these little flowers that are so delicate, you just barely touch them too hard and they disintegrate. And during this 6 years, you cannot speak one single word. The moment you speak, the spell will be broken, and we will be swans forever. She said, okay, I can do it. And about this time, they gave their last greetings and said, we will see you in 6 years to the day. And they turned back into swans and flew out. But before they left, they said, you cannot stay here. This is not a safe place. You must go elsewhere. And so she wandered and came to a tree, and finding these little aster flowers, she was picking, and she at first started knitting them together at the base of that tree. And she would knit, and at first it was so difficult, and she wanted to scream with frustration. She would get a few going and then she'd mess up and they'd all just fall apart. And she would try again and fall apart and try again. And she would want to say words of aggravation, but she could not utter anything. And for the sake of predators, she climbed higher up in the tree as the weeks and months went on. And as time progressed, she got doing this very good and started knitting together the flowers. The first year, she finally got the first shirt. The same with the second year and the third. And then she would always pay extra attention to the shirt when it got to the heart area. And then on that third year, a king from a distant kingdom came going through the forest. He felt drawn there because, my friends, when you're weaving magic like this, it starts to attract. And it attracts all things. It attracts animals. Animals would just sit at the base of the tree in wonder, watching this silent maiden. And so the king ventured through there with his squires and servants, and up and behold, in the tree he saw the maiden, and he said, "Hello there. What are you doing up there? Come down." And she would not say a word. You're knitting aster flowers, I see. Well, come down and we'll feed you. We'll take you to my kingdom." She just kept sewing. She was so focused. And those 3 years had made her so single-minded on her one purpose. But she did over time get to have a fondness and a care for this king because he was persistent. And finally, one day, she threw down a girdle from her leg. And then other times, she would take another piece of clothing and throw it down to the king, sort of saying, "Keep trying, boy. I like what you're doing." And finally, he came to her one day and said, "Look, let's be honest. I love you. I don't know why. I don't know your name. I've never talked with you. I don't even know you, but I love you. And I see that you are doing something very sacred. And I accept that about you. Now, if you'll just come down and come to my kingdom, you don't have to talk. You don't have to stop what you're doing in this sacred work of sewing these aster flowers together, making these shirts. Just come down and be my wife and come into my kingdom." And so she came down and she went with the king, and he wrapped her up in a blanket because by this time she didn't have much clothing. Kind of shows us of opening up to our vulnerability. And he brought her back to the kingdom. Well, she became pregnant with child. And in that time, she met the king's mother, who was later to be found out the same stepmother that had turned her brothers into swans. And so 9 months later, when she had become pregnant with child, still knitting and sewing these aster flower shirts, the mother-in-law, the old witch woman in the forest, would come and snatch the baby away and would take animal blood and smear it all over her mouth. And the next day would say, "Cannibal, cannibal, cannibal. She has eaten her child. She needs to be put to death." And so this happened 2 more times. So she was pregnant 3 times. And each time that old woman would come and snatch the baby away and say, "Cannibal, cannibal, cannibal. She's eating her children." And finally, something had to be done. The children were missing and blood on her face, but she never said a word. And so the king, not believing the accusations, but because of pressure, had to sentence his wife to death. And so in the prison that night, she is still sewing and sewing these aster flowers. He permitted her to still do that. And so on the next day, they took her out of the dungeon, put her in the cart, taking her to be burned. And as the people are mocking her and throwing things at her and calling her all types of names, she is silent and still knitting. And as they was about to put her at the stake to be burnt, as the sun was rising, it was to the day 6 years, 6 shirts. And she was on the last shirt, getting just the last little touches. And here came the 6 swans flying in, and she tossed them up. Toom, 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 toom. And they would just fly right in them, and they became human again. And they all stood around her, and no one dared go to her. And then, for the first time in 6 years, she spoke. And as she looked around, she looked at the king's mother and said, You are the one." And she started dispelling all the tales of how her brothers had become swans and her mother-in-law the witch, had done all this to the kingdom and had put her in this position. And so the tables flipped, and it was her that was burned at the stake. And all of the brothers were back to normal, except for the sixth one. His arm was the wing of a swan, because that shirt was not fully finished yet. And so the wrong was made right. And the brothers went to be great kings, except for the sixth brother, because to have a swan's wing is to be connected to the divine, to the unseen realm. And so he went off into his own mystical journey. And the kingdom was restored, and health was brought back to the land and to the kingdom, and all was united. So, my friends, in this tale, every character is inside of us. At some point in our lives, we have been the lost king. We have been the captive brothers. We have been the witch. We have been the evil queen. We have been the wandering king who finds his lost maiden. We have been the silent maiden, focused upon one goal. And then we come to the time when we speak. I'm not really going to elaborate more on that story, because I want you to feel it in your heart, in your inner being, and see how it speaks to you. These shamanic tales are not meant to be interpreted. They are meant to be digested, and over time, they show their medicine. And so, with that, I'm going to give an incense burning here, and give about 5 or 10 minutes, because as the trees are starting to bud and as we're approaching Easter, I love to see this time as Christ as the green man. And the green man, you may have seen pictures of a man with leaf foliage protruding from his nose and his mouth, and his face is greenery. And so, just to have a time with that, and I'm going to burn, maybe, if I can get the fire going, burn some holly leaves in remembrance of the spring equinox with the oak and holly king, as right now the oak king is in control, and the holly king's reign is dwindling little and more as the sun is going longer and rising more. And as you look into this glass thing here I have of a green man's face, there is cedar behind it. And just contemplate on this story, contemplate how the face we see in the trees, and how symbolism and feeling, the imagination, is where we find this wild Christ that speaks to us in words of heart and imagery. And so I hope this will be a blessing to you. I'm going to do it for about 5 or 10 minutes or so, and then we'll end this. instead of palm branches, I have cedar. And it is said that when you burn cedar or place it upon hot rocks, especially fresh cedar, it gives a squealing sound or a screech or a calling sound. And a lot of native tribes believe that calls the good spirits in, the ancestors and things. And so as Palm Sunday is a time of celebration, as a time of triumphal entry, we're going to burn first the holly, the departing of the seasons of the dark time of the year, and then we're going to burn the cedar. And as the wild Christ said, if these people would silence the stones, themselves would shout out with joy and praise. So why not have creation, in a sense, cry out in triumph and joy? And so I will turn this to the fire. And of last year's holly, of last year's joys and sorrows, of last year's evergreen and yet thorny situations, we release and let go of, that it leads to the awakening of the mind, from the lower cauldron to the middle cauldron and to the rising of divine. And of the sweet, fresh green cedar, full of life, and like the power of the feminine, focused, the power of silence and the power of when to know to speak with authority, focused on the life of others, the care of others. What was in silence and away from humanity brought humanity to it, and thus humanity brought that silent power that guiding ball of string led to. It led to the hearts. It led to triumph and victory. And what was wrongly accused and what appeared to be in weakness was great strength and beauty. What appeared to be the enemy was our friend, and what we thought might have been our friend was our enemy. It was not the divine's mind that needed to be changed, but our mind about the divine. And so, as we see the green man's face, Christ in the trees, may we, in our hearts, in that silence, and in that right time to speak boldly with authority and celebration and in love. Blessed be. Well, with that, my friends, is our evening and nighttime service. Hope that you enjoyed the teaching on the Upper Cauldron. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please leave a comment below and how this service may have inspired you, what you found interesting, what clicked with you, what resonated, anything you want to share. And may the fire burn within you in your lower cauldron, stirring those materials of life. May it rise to your heart, and may the stirrings of that cauldron of joy and sorrow lead you to your calling and vocation, and moving with that life force energy and purpose, seeing things in right perspective. Turn your upper cauldron upright. May that veil be removed. May the eyes and ears perceive the beauty and the truth that the forest and stone and river and wind hold within them. May you see the face of the wild green man, the wild Christ, and in doing so, be awakened, be enlightened, be inspired with the All-One. And until we meet again, my friends, may you be the All-One. Be blessed. May the skies be blessed, the land be blessed, the waters be blessed. May blessings and peace go forth in the east, the north, the west, and the south. And as we are the All-One, the peace and the blessing, because the fire burns within. Amen and amen.